Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Simona. As it was mentioned, I am a MarComm lead over at Samsung, and we're really excited to be here today to talk about the intersection of sports, marketing, and culture. So I will actually pass it over to my lovely panelists here to introduce themselves before we take it away with questions. So Sarah, do you want to kick us off, and then we'll head back this way?
I'm Sarah Larsen, Chief Marketing Officer at Samsung Home Entertainment.
I'm Aaron Eanes, CEO of NA Management Group, which is a full-service sports and entertainment management company.
Matt Robison, the CEO of Robotproof. We're an experiential and creative marketing agency.
Megan Ramm, I am head of the Americas for Uber Advertising, and I think everyone knows what Uber is. If you've taken one today, congratulations.
I'm Daniel Perez, CMO at InMarket. We're a real-time marketing and measurement company. And it says moderator, so depending on how it goes, well.
You can always jump in, feel free. So let's kick it off by talking about sports culture today. So sports are certainly becoming more and more mainstream. I think we can all agree about that, across both US and global audiences. So I want to kick off by talking about where do we currently see the most potential for growth when it comes to marketing opportunities. And Aaron, I will pass it over to you to start us off.
I think you see the most potential, honestly, in, I would say, women's sports. I think you see a lot of potential in the NHL. And then I would say women's sports in the NHL, and primarily because the cost of entry is lower. I would say obviously the excitement around what Caitlin Clark is doing, the excitement around what a lot of the young, stars are doing and how they're connecting locally, and even the business models of like what the NWSL is doing in their communities. And then you also see with the NHL how they're, in season, they're almost as popular as the NBA, but with drastically less brands participating.
And jumping on that, if that's okay. I think also, to Aaron's point, with the groundswell that we're seeing around women's sports, it's becoming such a cultural movement that's when brands like Samsung can really jump in and get involved in the conversations, because our shoppers, the people that are buying our TVs and our products, are also the ones that are watching women's sports, or they're also engaging in their football teams. It's that connection that we see that gives us the best opportunity to really break through in a different way.
And then I would say from Uber's perspective, it's the same thing, right? We're obviously understanding people are going to the stadium. We see that through ride share data, and those are large volume days for our application. But in additionally, this is like this primetime moment for in-home viewing, right? And then how does that change the behavior that we see in purchasing across restaurants, grocery, and convenience? Those are big nights for big days. As well for our platform, and we're looking at tapping into the consumer trends for purchase and eater behavior, as well as the mobility traffic that we drive on the ground to these types of events.
When I think from a media perspective and kind of community building, what we're seeing is a lot of opportunity with AR and VR experiences and being able to bring the game home. So we've done a lot of campaigns with brands that are engaging the consumer during the breaks of the game. So during the US Open, we did a campaign where they were actually playing tennis with their choice of person on their mobile device. So the opportunity to bring that real-time experience during these games is something that we're seeing a lot of brands leaning into.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point too. And so we've talked here already a little bit about women's sports and what's next in terms of the evolution that we're seeing. But let's talk a little bit about what's already been happening. So Sarah, I'm going to pass this one to you. But what have been the biggest cultural shifts that you've observed in the sports, entertainment, marketing, culture spaces over the past 5 years?
Yeah, I think, sports athletes have always become sort of celebrities. But I think what we're seeing is a more realistic, true side of athletes, not just being a name that's on some sort of an ad and that's a very branded. Instead, you're seeing really authentic relationships that actually represent an athlete and a brand when they come together over something they truly believe in. And I know Aaron and I have talked about this a lot, just with athletes that he works with and a brand like Samsung. It's all about a connection that's honest and genuine, and that it has to be authentic. It can't just be someone up there shilling your product. So I think that sort of cultural shift where it's a true relationship that's symbiotic as opposed to just a name that's in an ad.
Yeah, I think you see that too, and having, especially in the tech brand space, right? You see them marketing in against what they're actually doing for that sport, right? So you see AWS with Formula One and actually talking about how their product is there to support that sport in the background, right? Yes, a fan never sees that, but they're actually telling that authentic story. And so many times before, they were just slapping their logo on a billboard to go around the track, right? But they're actually telling that story. Even though, again, it's not wholly relevant to the everyday fan, the authenticity of the story makes it relevant to the fan in that way.
When I think the authenticity becomes a bigger piece of it, so does the personalization piece. So building personalized media campaigns that really resonate, take that authenticity of the athlete, tying it to the brand, and then letting the consumer engage with it and kind of build that community. Because at the end of the day, it's about the impact for your brand, but also for your bottom line. So tying loyalty to real world commerce, I think, is a big aspect of it too.
Yeah, and I think you see that shift primarily because of, I would say, social media, right? Previously, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the athlete pretty much was told what brands they could work with, how they were going to work with those brands. And then essentially, like, you would have a fan because of the sport you played or the league you're in. Where when starting with Facebook and then all the way on to now Instagram and TikTok, et cetera, you're seeing athletes being able to build large communities because of their sports, but then at the same time, now they can actually have that one-to-one relationship, and it's more transferable than just throwing your name on a big billboard, which then, now going to the authenticity piece, you can bring in brands that they naturally engage with, naturally use, and they have more of that trust than just, I would say, before people could actually build a one-to-one relationship with them.
Yeah, and I lastly to the commerce piece, I would say, we're an NFL sponsor, for example, and then we bring in a partner like Pepsi, and they are kind of sponsoring this Uber Eats kiosk on the ground at the event. So people can go in, they can shop convenience, they can shop grocery, they can order restaurants, they can get personal items. That's bringing the services that we offer in the app to the actual stadium or the live experience with the event, and connecting it with brands that also have a presence at these types of moments is a huge unlock for us as we continue to think about how we show up and in what authentic ways we communicate to the consumer.
Yeah, and I also think that one of the biggest stages where we often observe this is, of course, with the Olympics, which just wrapped. And so the next question that I want to pose to the group is, when you're thinking about something that has the scale of the Olympics, how can a brand effectively engage within that space, and how do you actually stand out? So, Sarah, I'll pass it to you to kick things off.
You keep passing it to me. So for Samsung is an official partner of the Olympics. However, it's in certain categories. So I look after home entertainment, which is TV, audio, and memory, and we are not an official partner. So we were faced with a unique challenge that Samsung's name was out there for the Olympics, but there wasn't really something that we could jump on. So we had to find a new and different way to get into it. So what we did was there's an organization called Gold Meets Golden, which was started by Nicole Kidman and some other celebrities, and it's essentially people from Hollywood sending good wishes to athletes before they leave to go compete in the Olympics. And we found a very authentic way in that we partnered with them, and when the different celebrities gave their messages to the athletes, they recorded a video message that they saw. We then also donated a TV. So they, in addition to telling the athlete that, good luck and compete and bring it home the gold for US, Samsung's also giving you a 98-inch TV so your friends and family can follow along from home if they can't make it to Paris. For us, it was a really smart and genuine way to get into the Olympics conversation without being an official sponsor. And I think with culture, you're seeing more of that kind of backdoors in and different ways that you can be a little bit more flexible in how you can get involved in the conversation.
And Megan, I think you had a great story to tell here too.
Yeah, I know, Aaron, you had some points too. You go ahead and.
Yeah, I mean, I think like NBC and Peacock and them, their decision to really, I would say, blast the Olympics all over the place was super smart because it kind of, in my opinion, respected the consumer and where they're going to get their sports, especially when like non-traditional sports that people weren't necessarily looking to work with, but then also with Snoop Dogg. Just with his personality, with his energy, with his excitement, the fan got to kind of be the fan of the sport through his eyes and through his actions. And I think that's why obviously in the environment we're in, a lot of people want to just really use sports as an outlet. And I think they did an amazing job of showcasing the excitement and the joy and the spontaneity that, it is the games through someone like Snoop Dogg who really transcended, I would say, honestly, and was the biggest winner of the games of anybody.
And why do you think Snoop resonated so much?
I mean, he's identifiable, but then he also is just authentically him. So,
Yeah.
I mean, when you see him, he is always the same. He is just truly himself, and I think he's able to kind of bridge the gaps between young, old, rich, poor, diverse. And I think, when you're looking at all of the someone who, like most of us probably have never experienced an Olympics games, truly seeing how he experienced certain games and matches was just hilarious. I mean, and so I think that's why it probably resonated, because when you're watching it, you're like, oh, I probably have that same experience and I can connect with that. Versus someone just analyzing like what they're doing on the field.
Yeah, I was going to say, I can attest. I was there with our friends at Coca-Cola too in Newber, and can attest that he made the games. So certainly, share that sentiment. I would also say that just from our perspective, we're looking at logistics on the ground, right? Like, are the Ubers going to get you to the event? Are they going to get you there on time? Uber was founded in Paris, and we actually spent a lot of time before, we're an event sponsor, but we spent a lot of time before the games making sure logistically that we were reliable and accurate, and that you're seeing the same kind of pickup times that you expect around the globe normally.
I think, too, what we're really seeing that's kind of interesting is brands trying to strike the balance between globalization and localization. So you think about, they have this brand ethos, they have this global brand presence, they're partnering with specific athletes that align with their message that they want to get out. Then they also have to look at the localized messaging and partnering with the hometown heroes. So starting with the Olympics, but getting all the way down to these smaller regional local markets to really build loyalty and build community. And I think using localized messaging and balancing it with the brand global presence is something that they're really starting to figure out, and specifically sports is a huge opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I think the one thing you also hit on, Sarah, was zooming out a little bit, right? And so, yes, some of you represent really big brands, some of you kind of mid-market, right, and even small. Don't let the Olympics intimidate you, right? And certainly, when I was at Beats by Dre, we never let the Olympics nor any of the rules intimidate us, right? We just showed up and did what the fuck we wanted to do. Like, that was just the honest thing. Jimmy said, go put headphones on people and market the shit out of the brand until people pay attention, right? And I think you have to really think that way and not be intimidated by these big organizations. Think about the sport, think about the athletes, support them, and then all of a sudden your brand will show up, it'll pop.
And so when it comes to meeting people where they are, I think the idea of the globalization and localization is certainly an important one, but beyond that, how do you stay authentic? How do you ensure that if you're jumping into a cultural moment, you are doing so in an authentic way that resonates with your brand and the people that you're trying to reach? So, Matt, I think you said you had a couple examples here, too.
Oh, yeah. I always got lots of great beat stories, certainly for these. But, yeah, I think there's two elements to this, right, and the way we used to look at it. One is how you connect with the actual athlete, right, and making sure you get to know who they are and they're not a piece of paper to you. Right? And I remember we worked with Neymar, right? Neymar's dad represents Neymar, right? So he's sitting in the room with us talking about the family, we're talking about Brazil, we're hearing their story and what Neymar wants to come out in this campaign, and that's where the creative ideas come from, right? Not from the piece of paper, oh, we signed Neymar and he's going to be part of our World Cup campaign, right? You had to actually listen to them, you have to connect with them, you have to understand who they are, what they represent, and that'll help drive your creative. And then on the flip side of it is make sure you're in the right place, right? And so, the late Pete Rose and I were great friends, and he used to always hound on me about data, right? And, it's not hard when he owns half of the freaking records in baseball, right? So he loves the numbers, but his big thing when we were putting together campaigns and always be jiving ideas was make sure the data supports where you're going. So make sure you look, is your audience actually there, right? Because so many times you get wrapped up and you sign this great athlete and you want to go after this moment, then you actually realize once you deliver, you can have a great marketing campaign, but if your audience wasn't there, it's all to waste, right? And so really make sure at the same time you're looking at the data, finding out, hey, does this audience actually exist where we're about to put this campaign to use?
And when we're thinking about data, I think taking it a step beyond that as well, let's talk measurement. So when you are actually executing a fantastic campaign, how do you measure success and what do those results look like?
Yeah, I think, I don't want to say vanity metrics, but I think clicks are no longer the end-all be-all, and I think especially when you're talking about authenticity and culture, understanding, what's working, what's resonating with audiences, what's resonating, what types of creative is resonating, what types of experience are resonating. And I think in order to do that, you really have to look at measurement. And you can't look at it in a silo, and you can't look at it at the end. You need to be in it in real time and really looking at, all right, these are the audiences that are performing. This is the message where it's going, and be able to optimize that. And optimize it in a way that, the channels that are performing for you are really going to help you on that next campaign. I think oftentimes measurement is an afterthought, or a big aha moment we had a few years ago was, is my measurement making me smarter? Or am I just using it to validate a campaign that I did? And so leveraging that measurement not only to make smarter decisions on your next campaign, but also making it building your brand is what comes important with, and I think measurement really does help that.
And what kind of measurement tools do you think are most useful for marketers when when they're thinking about the kinds of bigger scale campaigns or the smaller ones as well?
Yeah, so historically we are a foot traffic based measurement, and we've since grown to be sales attribution, as well as we just are launching what's known as MIM, but it's a mixed media modeling, but it's predictive mixed media modeling. So being able to build your model beforehand, then put it into market and test it, and then being able to optimize is the word, but continuously make adjustments throughout it, and then going back and checking it. I think the biggest piece for us that we've looked at, and we looked at it across QSR, across retail, across CPG, is, again, measurement shouldn't be used in a silo. You shouldn't use measurement just for your big campaigns. It should be always on, because if you're able to continue to make smarter decisions from one campaign to the other and understanding what's resonating with your brand, then you're going to get a lot more return, and then again a lot more loyalty.
I would just, one other point there is, from our perspective, like, our data is our most valuable asset, right? We're in 70 countries for the Rider app, 35 countries for delivery, right? So a ton of organic data that we can use to fuel how we think about not only organic campaigns, but paid things for marketers. And then to your point, Matt, showing up where you have a right to play, right? We're in Chile, we're in Brazil. The purchase behavior, the rider behavior looks very different in those environments, and when you look across 70 countries, right? So how do we take the local data that we have, the real-time access to it, and then start to build from the ground up on those behaviors?
Yeah, and I think you hit on a good point there. You said real time, right? And I think you'd hit on real time as well, because culture moves at the speed of now, right? And so if you're using monthly reporting, you're a dinosaur at this point, right? You need real-time data to drive where your insights are coming from and how to react to the market.
And I would also just love to hear from all of our panelists, what is a great example of a marketing campaign that effectively touched on all of these things and tapped into culture? I think Aaron and Matt, you mentioned you had some great stories on this one.
You want to start? You go.
Yeah, I think it was a little, when we did a campaign, I would say the best example was, I work with Travis Kelce of the Kansas City Chiefs, and we did a campaign with Pfizer that was a little bit controversial. We don't, try not to say that name much. But I think they actually, what I would say is, from my perspective, a lot of times when you're dealing with brands, they don't really understand sometimes how to work with the athletes. And usually it's because they just have way too many people in the room, and don't ask, like, to Matt's point, just the questions. So, like, my job is to really communicate and over-communicate what we are trying to get out of something. And also, is it authentic to what we're trying to do? And so, obviously, when you're dealing with brands that could be quote-unquote controversial, you really have to be extra sensitive to, like, what's the reaction going to be. And we saw kind of, first off, it was big for us to, like, we don't want to tell anybody what to do. Like, everyone's going to have their own free agency to do whatever they want to do. So that was kind of the theme of the campaign. And it was because of all the misinformation out there about, it was also the confusion of, like, all the boosters and everything. So when they rolled out, the fact is they wanted it to be an opportunity to let people know that if you're going to get a flu shot, go get a COVID shot, right? And also they really had trouble with white males, obviously middle America, clearly. But, what we saw, and also, like, brand trust was a big thing that they did not have either. So we were able to really work together and see in real time that once they launched the campaign, obviously Aaron Rodgers helped amplify that campaign, and they were able to react very quickly, which was impressive to me, because a lot of times you don't see brands extending campaigns, diving deeper, going to different places based on the reaction of the market. And if you fast forward and look at the success of that campaign, they had a 45% brand lift between the areas that they were trying to reach. They had over 1,000% conversion, was nominated for a Cannes Lion, and it was one of the things where, for me, seeing something that could have been completely off the rails if you didn't have that trust, if you didn't have that alignment, and then to see how successful it was after the fact with the goals and KPIs that they had, I think they did a very good job of marrying, ultimately what the goals are of the brand in the campaign with the talent and seeing, and I would say generally speaking, when you deal with healthcare companies, any company that could basically get sued, they're very good at understanding brand fit, where a lot of brands historically would work with someone who they were a fan of, or I always say my favorite exercise would be talking to a brand about all of what they're trying to get out of something, and then my next question would be, well, why are you working with this talent? And they'd be like, oh, so-and-so was a fan. And it's just like, oh, okay, well, that was just a wasted of all your time and money. But I think nowadays, because of always on data, because of being able to really hyper-target kind of the audiences of these athletes and entertainers, you're seeing more brand alignment and not people just working with the obvious names. You're seeing people work with retired players like what Uber's campaign was. You're seeing people work with players that don't even play because they truly align with the campaign. Like Will Levis and Hellman's. I don't love mayo, but what they got a lot. But my wife loves mayo, so it's she loved that campaign. I'm like, this is disgusting. But it was a great job for Hellman's, a company that you would never hear about and talk about in relation to football, coming out with an over-the-top, funny campaign that truly resonated with their brand.
You talked about being reactive, right? And I think the favorite campaigns I've seen recently kind of come out are always the ones that respond to something that just happened, right? And I think it was last season, Ohtani hit a home run and he broke Coors Light's sign. And then they went and printed entire cans with that same missing square from their logo, right? It was a perfect campaign, right? They took that moment. They didn't take months to debate with the design and legal team, what's this going to do to our logo or whatever. They broke the sign. Somebody sent that to print within a week, right? It was at the next game. They were there telling this story. Sales popped, right? I didn't think you could sell more beer to baseball fans, but they somehow did it.
Yeah, we have a campaign that we just did recently with a leading beer brand, but they came to us. We talked about measurement. They came to us because they wanted to run a campaign. They wanted to test a new channel, which was digital out of home. But they also had the problem that they don't understand a lot of their local markets and the different audiences that would actually resonate. And so we did this 3-day, or it's a 3-day campaign every weekend because it was all about driving on-prem beer sales days leading up to the game and game day. And we, 24 to 48 hours, we were serving them ads on CTV and mobile and desktop. It was a community engagement game. So as the more you saw the ad, the more you played, the more points you earned. And then on the day of the game, all of the digital billboards around the premises, so the sports bars, the sports venues, would then give you another opportunity to engage with the game. And then as you walked into the venue, we would serve them a real-time activation. And they learned insane amount about who they should be targeting, who they're missing, how they're not, being authentic to, the audience they want to reach. But we coined a new term, keg lift, because it had crazy sales lift, crazy engagement, but now on all their reports, they put how many more kegs they were able to sell at each weekend. It was a pretty cool experience.
Well, this was an incredible panel, so thank you all so much for all of the wonderful insights. We so appreciate everybody's time today, and I'll let our panelists here share any closing thoughts.
I don't have any.
No.
Does anyone have any questions before we go? Well, I personally love it because I think we're seeing who people truly are, and it's polished is one way to look at it, but I also think it was very manufactured, so that it was more of an image that was created for them and not true to who they actually are. I know for us, when we look at partnering with talent, and we moved away from partnering with influencers, we call it talent because it's really around content. We need to have a genuine relationship with them to the point that I have taken a year before signing someone on because we want to get to know them. We want them to interact with products and find out if they really like Samsung and our brand and what we represent long before we're going to use them in any sort of creative. So I think taking the time to get to know someone is always a good exercise, and then that reflects to how you interact with your shoppers or your consumers by showing that person's true self. It just makes a lot more of a real connection with engagement.
We talked about globalization versus localization, and there's a really good example of a campaign this summer. Travis Kelce did the Wawa commercial. It was for their Hoagie Fest. It was about how he's becoming a normal dad, and he still goes to Wawa.
That was his brother Jason.
Sorry, I told these guys I'm not a big football fan, but I know the media side. So anyway, so the campaign, how authentic it was as like bringing that global figure to their local Wawas and building that brand, because it's a very regional establishment. So, God, lost a point there.
There's one more question, and then we'll wrap it up. Okay.
You know, culture happens at the speed of now, which I think is brilliant, so I'm going to steal it from you. But what was interesting was... Trademarking that, smart. I think, you know, the Coors example, I remember that a year or so ago. The Oreo example years ago, right? This past weekend at a Cal game, Cal Berkeley, a college football game, a kid with Vans kicked a field goal scenario or something, and it went viral. What does it take for an organization? I thought Vans should pick that up like right now, right? And they didn't, from my knowledge. What does it take for an organization to be able to react so quickly, right? Because Coors is not a small organization, right? And it's layered, it's bureaucratic. I'm sure Vans is as well. What does it take, or what do you advise them to be able to be that on top of culture?
I mean, I know at Uber we have, you know, round the clock kind of teams focused on this, right? So and we call them saves the week or catches of the week, right? We are not going to let someone, whether it's a negative experience that we need to rectify, right, or a moment that we can build on, we don't let those moments go unnoticed. You need to actually have a muscle within your organization to deal with that, right? And then what we see on the brand side is, again, they look at data. If you're Campari and you're seeing your drink, your drink pop over the week or the weekend, or there's been a social mention that then drives purchase, we do have mechanisms for the brand to get in fast to actually drive sales on the platform if they're seeing it pop in other areas of their business.
I'm biased because I own several marketing agencies, but I would say you have to trust your agency, right? Like this is a lot, or your internal team, right? However you're structured to do it, but you need to have trusted partners who are going to go out there, capture that moment, and put it together, right? Core's marketing team wasn't sitting around designing that. They picked up the phone, they called their agency. I think Wyden probably made it, right, or something like that. And they put it together that week, right? You have to trust that you have a partner to go to who's going to move at that speed for you or be ahead of it, right? And we do work with Samsung. Part of our mandate with Samsung and our retainer is to look for those things and bring them to Sarah and say, she can say, hey, no, you're crazy, I'm not touching this. Or, like I said, once she says go, we have the green light, right? There's no budget decisions or whatever. It's you just get it done.
Well, thank you, everybody. We really appreciate the time.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.